actually did not have any pica infarct. I did get a CTA before she got discharged. She actually had no dizziness whatsoever, no evidence of infarct. It may have to do with I had her on heparin for 24 hours and I kept her on aspirin. She still is on aspirin. So no, got lucky there.
Yeah.
Nora, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go.
Of course.
Great case and beautiful result. Two questions. Was the fistula only fed by just pica distal to the aneurysm? Or
Yes.
were there any other feeders?
That's it. That was the only feeder. It was direct pica. Yeah.
So my first question is, would you have considered just obviously putting some coils in like we did to thrombose the pica aneurysm, and then just plugging the distal, the inflow to the aneurysm would ultimately potentially occlude your fistula. That's number one. And number two, your concerns about hydrocephalus, right? Once we treat these giant aneurysms, especially in the posterior circulation, and whether, when would you recommend preemptively placing a ventriculostomy, especially if you're going to be heparinizing the patient?
Yeah, so I mean, two great questions. To answer the first one, you said what you said is potentially not injecting onyx, just not penetrating onyx into the fistula, just gonna shut down the pica itself and the aneurysm.
The inflow, if you have a single outflow to the fistula, once we take down the aneurysm and the inflow to the aneurysm, would that have cured your fistula regardless?
Right. I mean, that could have been an option. And actually, if you see the run, when I inflated the septor, the fistula was not filling anymore. So that could have been an option for sure. But I wanted to penetrate get some onyx into the venous side, the actual fistula to prevent. She's young. I was worried she could recur if I just occluded the aneurysm without actually getting the onyx, pretty deep in that fistula. Now, for the second question, I didn't have that many concerns. Her MRI, I didn't have it up, but her fourth was wide open, and I kept her in the ICU for 48 hours. Got a scan afterwards, and she didn't have any issues, but definitely a concern. She could definitely develop obstructive hydrocephalus, but she didn't have that at the time.
Nohra, from looking at the imaging, again, I don't have all the views, but the transarterial way seemed to be straightforward more than the venous. Did you have to go transvenous? And if you didn't drop this little onyx in the vein, don't you think you could have cured it the way you did just transarterial?
100%. I probably did not need to come transvenous, but I did that first, just in case I didn't get any venous penetration with my onyx. That I would have at least, onyx 34 on the other side, including the vein, the main draining vein. It was just like a plan B, which is why I had it. But totally, I had very nice penetration. I did not need that whole bit of onyx gas distally. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you, I spent a good 15 minutes trying to get a microcatheter on the venous side from the arterial side, like you suggested. It looked straightforward, but do you think it would have changed a lot to get that, like, for example, a microcatheter up in the venous side, as opposed to...
You mean go navigate inside the aneurysm and try to get out? Yeah, I mean, again, with the balloon microcatheter, I think usually we have really good penetration. Your idea of putting the coils so you won't have all this big cast of onyx in the aneurysm, and I think worked well. What was the size of the pica vessel, and did you use a mini septor or a septor?
No, that was a septor. The pica was about 3.5 millimeters, maybe 3 millimeters. I'm sorry, 3 millimeters.
So you just underinflated the balloon.
Yes, I underinflated, kept checking runs just to make sure I don't rupture that pica.
So I have a question for Nora. It's a beautiful case. So I remember a very similar case with an arteriovenous malformation, and in the close to the nidus were a specific fistula, very similar to yours from the pica. And so the question is, what is your recommendation, just if you want to occlude just the arterial distal very close to the vein. What is your technical recommendation? Because most of the times you try to put some coils and they jump into the aneurysm distally. So personally, for example, in our case, we need to place two balloons and do a simultaneous coil deployment through the balloons while inflated, trying to, do a nice cast. I don't know if you have any specific recommendations for this type of maneuvers.
This is like a legitimate concern, right? That you're coiling the distal pica and that just the flow, it's such a high flow lesion that just the coils are gonna travel distally. With the Scepter, I didn't have that problem at all. And, I think just what I did is I left enough pica beyond the tip of the Scepter, and I made sure I had flow arrest. And that onyx cast in by itself and the pica was able to hold. But totally, I could have probably put a couple coils first in the distal pica and then inject the onyx on top to kind of create a more solid plug there. I hope that's your question.
Yes, and personally, I don't know if the pica was functional at all because at the end it has big fistula, so maybe you may occlude more proximal, I think, with no problem, but it was a beautiful maneuver. Second question is about, in those patients, the anticoagulation regimen after the treatment. So do you recommend to continue with anticoagulation?
Oh, totally. So here, the main concern was I knew I was going to be able to occlude the fistula. I just didn't know if the pica was going to thrombose in a retrograde fashion. And we see that all the time. You even though your onyx cast is distal, it just will shut down retrograde. So, 24 hours on heparin, I bolused heparin, made sure I'm fully heparinized. And then I kept it 24 hours and, I checked the scan, everything looked okay. So then, I switched her to an aspirin, and I kept her so far on aspirin. I'll probably take her off in a year.
And Nora, not only from an arterial standpoint, when those high flow fistulas, you shut them suddenly completely, you're worried about the venous side also. This is also one more reason why you're gonna keep them on anticoagulation. We like to do that to avoid any, thrombosis that goes all the way.
Would you do it any longer, Pascal, than 24 hours?
I would do 24 hours. I would look. It depends on the case, and then I may keep them on an antiplatelet, but that's it.
Right. And then one more thing I should say, the blood pressure management should be very strict here. You got to keep the blood pressure, controlled, because you're changing the dynamics, the hemodynamics in the brain. You worry about the hemorrhage, or so definitely post-op ICU, is the destination.
And same thing intraoperatively, Nora, right? Right before we inject onyx, as you know, we'll really lower the blood pressure during the embolization with your onyx. While obviously monitoring heart rate as well. So great case.
Of course, thank you.
There's a question here.
Yes.
Mario?
Yes, Pascal, yes, continue, please.
Yeah, good. So we have a question from Christine Blackham. What about non-detached coil and glue in the distal pica, like the pressure cooker technique for AVM?
What was the first part? What kind of coil?
What about non? So I think what she meant is detach, put coils, but don't detach the coils. You have two catheter technique. Put proximally the coil from the arterial side. So and then retrieve the coils after you. I think what you did is similar to pressure cooker technique. Actually, you inflated the balloon from the arterial side. This was your only inflow arterially. You inflated the balloon. The only difference is with the pressure cooker, you could have gone from the transvenous and inflated the balloon, or put some coils to create completely a closed system. But it's the same idea. So
yeah, the vein was very tortuous. If you look at it, it's very hard to navigate.
Yeah, I know it was very tortuous, and
I could have had the Phenom Plus. Yes.
The problem is also when you deflate, you only place, for example, one coil, and you deflate, and then everything moves. So again, two balloons maybe in our experience is a nice way to solve that, and simultaneously coils. But yes, Christine is a good suggestion. Thank you for telling.
Yeah.
Okay. And one more thing is, you're asking too much. Like if you just rely on a balloon and not coil the aneurysm, like you're gonna need a lot of onyx there to fill, because it's gonna probably fill the giant aneurysm first, and then fill the fistula. So you just have to make sure you have enough onyx on the shelf, that they're shaking it. So, I think it expedited the case quite a bit, to have a bunch of coil in the dome.
Sure. Any more questions, anyone?
Yeah, I have the last question. If you have any preference in terms of liquid embolic agent when you are treating dural arteriovenous fistulas or fistulas in general?
Yeah, I only use onyx. That's all we have here anyway. I'll defer to Pascal and Stab. I know they've used NBCA in the past.
Yeah, I think before balloon assistance, before Scepter, NBCA, you could, affect the density and potentially propel it more distal. But now with Scepter, there's really no need for that. I've been using Onyx strictly for the last at least 5 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. The glue, the NBCA, that wouldn't reflux as much as the Onyx, but now with the balloon, no issues.
Do you have any specific problem, guys? Because we saw before in a previous session, do you have any specific problem with the balloon getting attached because of the Onyx and having troubles with retrieval and block the artery, having a hemorrhage? Do you experience this type of problems?
I can tell you in this case, I had the 6 French Sophia up on the balloon to be able to detach it. So yes, it was, it was low stock, but definitely having the 6 French Sophia up in the Pica was for that reason specifically, so that I have enough support to actually be able to pull the balloon without really torquing on that vessel too much.
I think we need detachable balloon microcatheters.
Totally.
It would be fantastic. Yeah, good point, man. I don't know if you have experience with the Scepter Mini in the US.
Yeah, I've used Scepter Mini. I think it's a great balloon for distal small vessels, and if you don't have Scepter Mini because there are issues with production and it's not available at that time, under inflating a Scepter balloon is also okay. So.
Okay, so thank you very much, Pascal. I think it has been a very interesting session.